I really think it starts with knowing your people. And when you onboard a new direct report or you onboard a new employee, I hope that conversations are happening around, hey, listen, how do you like to hear you're doing a good job? And how do you like to hear when I have ideas for ways that you could reach your goals faster?
Welcome back to the Trust Built podcast. I am your host, Alan Bennett, and today we are going to talk about trust, culture, leadership. We're going to talk about all the good things that you need to have on your team, within your team, and how to build a team. It's going to be a great conversation. So today's guest, we got Steve Blair. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Alan. Happy to be here. It's fun.
You know, I was looking forward to this. I've had a few episodes in the back where I've really resonated with a guest because of the way that they run their business and the way that I like to help people run businesses. Yeah. And so I'm anticipating this with you. This is going to be one of those resonating. So I'm putting you way up there.
Oh, man.
Putting you way up there.
Don't put the bar too high, Alan.
So if you would, take a minute to explain the business that you're in and the concept of what you're trying to accomplish through your work.
Well, it's going to be a bit of a windy answer, I'm afraid, but I have a day job, and I'm Chief People Officer for a company called the Fulcrum Collective, and we're in the Walmart supplier space, and our company in particular manages a lot of the Walmart business for the egg category from a supply chain standpoint. We basically come alongside retailers and help them solve the complexities of the really important supply chains, and eggs and protein and beef are tough supply chains. So I had the opportunity to come in 2 years ago and help rebuild that culture. It's a 30-year-old company, family owned, decades of great results from the business and decades of great results from a culture standpoint. And then they had a chapter kind of there about 10 years ago where they kind of lost some of that cultural magic. And so I got the opportunity to come in 2 years ago full time and sit at the leadership table and try to bring a strategy into action that would earn back the culture that they had for so long. So that's my day job. I do love to meet with founders and leaders and help them think through their strategies for scaling fast, scaling healthy. I think my biggest passion is helping people do both at the same time. Scaling a company that's growing revenue, but also growing headcount and doing it in a way that is authentic and doing it in a way that doesn't cost what many companies experience, which is they take their eye off the ball from a culture standpoint or from a values lived out standpoint. And so I really try to help folks navigate those fun but complex waters of fast growth.
You mentioned cost. That word, there's actually a couple of words. I want to go back to the egg thing in a minute.
Okay.
But you mentioned cost.
Yep.
And I have this conversation with clients all the time about what's the cost of turnover? What's the cost of culture?
Yeah.
What's the cost of the lack of trust? And it's a struggle for them to quantify what that cost is. Sometimes it's tangible, sometimes it's intangible. So in your experience, wading through the cost standpoint, how do you view that? How do you explain that to the group to help them understand where the cost lies?
Yeah, great question. I would say there's both direct and indirect costs when you veer off of course, and that's how I'm interpreting your question. Is hey, when you get off of course, there's costs. I think there's direct cost, which is if you actually do have turnover, then of course everybody knows the math that it costs more to replace than to keep or retain. There could be lagging indicator costs on the business if you take your eye off of the strategy, or take your eye off of top talent, and then you have to rebuild from there. Revenue can suffer because the business goes through some cycles. But the indirect costs are on the folks that stay. That's what I've experienced is there's a significant cost paid by the folks that stay. They know how good it was, and they're always so excited to see help coming. But there's a cost there. There's a cost in loyalty. There's a cost in showing up whole and being excited to come to work every day. I can't put a dollar figure on most of that, but on the indirect side, those are real. Those are real costs.
Think about the people that stay. From my perspective, is it impacts negatively employee engagement overall.
Sure.
Just purpose, accountability, trust
for sure. Yep.
They're being on the Trust Built podcast. I usually try to guide my guests to the trust, but before we get there, a lot of times when it comes to employee engagement and the costs that are associated with it, without purpose and accountability, it's hard to even build trust, right?
Sure. Yeah, for sure. And I think all the offshoots of the cost of engagement or lack of engagement might be, not fully embracing the role they have. And if that's the case, the organization may not understand that and maybe add a headcount to try and offset the gap if there's not clarity around somebody's role expectations. There's lots of high costs for organizations when engagement suffers.
One of the things that I wanted to ask you about today was about growth, growth and culture. And as the business grows, how does it impact the culture? And that's kind of what we're kind of dancing around that campfire in this conversation of engagement.
Yep.
So the difference between, or I don't know if I should ask it as the difference between, but when you're talking growth and you're talking culture, how does culture shift or change as things grow? Yeah,
great question, Alan. And I have had the pleasure and blessing of living that a few times, and so I think how a company and organization navigates growth from a culture standpoint starts right away with the sincerity and the buy-in of the values. And if there is clarity around what the values are, alignment around those are our actual values, not just the ones we talk about, but those are the ones that we recruit for, reward, hire, fire, promote. As long as those are true, authentic, consistent, those can be the anchor point as you grow. And I've seen organizations veer from those, and it's not gone great. The ones I've seen that have navigated it successfully have doubled down on those as they've grown. That does not mean that when you get to 100 people and all you've done is double down on your values, that your culture will be fine and everything's fine. Like, there are growing pains in organizations. But I've seen some particular concepts that help organizations process as they grow. Here's one that I've shared with a couple of different organizations. Early on, there's a lot of culture creators in an organization. You think about a startup, you think about the first 5 folks, the founder, 2 founders, 5, 10 people. They're all co-creating the culture as you go. And then over time, there emerges some folks that aren't necessarily culture creators, but there's culture keepers. And those are people that really embody the culture, and they'll be the ones to onboard new folks informally, probably. And there become this team of people that take real personal responsibility for keeping the culture healthy and authentic to how it started. And then as you get, beyond 100 people, it's just natural that there's going to be some culture consumers, folks that aren't part of creating the culture, weren't part of creating the culture, aren't part of creating the culture, and aren't even really keepers of the culture. They're aligned to the values, they're a good fit, but they're consumers of the culture that has been built. And I try to coach organizations that, look, once you get to a certain point, you're always going to have all 3 of those kinds of people. It's when the ratio gets out of whack, where you have more consumers than you do keepers, you see drift. And I think I've seen it preemptively addressed and no issue. And I've seen it drift and repairs had to be made. And it's just a fascinating way to look at it, because as you recruit faster, you spend a little less time on the 7 different panel interviews and you just don't have that kind of time as you did your first 25 hires in the organization. Not that you're reducing your standards or easing up on your process, but you just get more efficient. You have more people in the interview process, and you find people that don't quite know the heritage. They weren't here 5 years ago. And so you just naturally have this evolution of, you've got a handful of creators still around, hopefully. You've got some keepers that are very passionate about the health of the organization. And then you've got folks that, for not an intentional purpose, they become consumers of this great culture that's been built. And I try to help organizations do two things. One, watch the ratio, be mindful that if the tipping point falls towards consuming rather than keeping is one thing. And the second thing is try to have some strategies to move some consumers to keepers. Find ways for them to really dial in to where their unique footprint or handprint, I should say, is on the company. They naturally become keepers at that point. But I don't think people are naturally inclined to come in new and find their way into a keeper role when the organization is large. But the good leaders will find their way from being a consumer to a keeper about as fast as possible. The good fits.
I'm not frozen for those that are watching. I'm thinking.
Yeah.
See that the concept that you're talking about here, I'm assuming that you've got tools that you use to help regulate or to monitor. What kind of, how do you do? So you're talking about it and it makes sense, but is there a way that you help organizations do that, or a way that an organization can find tools to help with that?
Yeah, I would say there's a very scientific way, and that is talk amongst the leadership team, amongst the people that understand the talent and that are responsible for the talent in the organization. Regular talent development discussions, whether that's part of a formal annual, biannual review process, or it's part of a strategic offsite. I tend to like to encourage talent reviews to happen at offsites where you can put names on the wall and you can talk about great results they've delivered. You can talk about blind spots you want to help people understand. You want to talk about growth trajectory and career path options for people. But it's really important to have that cross-company calibration so that one manager isn't looking at and developing talent materially different than another manager, thus providing those different direct reports, different levels of opportunity, different levels of engagement. So I would say the first one is just talk a lot about talent. And for that to happen, you need to really care about the talent. And that is hard for me to develop in companies, which is why the folks that I try to work with, that's a green light test for me, is do they genuinely, uniquely care about the people? And in this current role with Fulcrum, like that was a glaring green light for me, was that the organization was bought in. They just needed some help. The more formal way of keeping your fingers on the pulse around keepers, creators, and consumers is the tried and true engagement survey. I know that in the world of HR, you either love them or you think they're crazy or you don't like them. I'm a huge fan because it is let me put it like this. I have not found a more successful, consistently impactful way to build trust in an organization than a properly executed engagement survey. And here's what that looks like. I don't know if you're about to ask that, but I'm about to tell you.
Yes, I was.
Here's what that looks like. Here's what that looks like for me. Look, I have a silly phrase that I use to help me keep it straight, and then to help leaders kind of grasp the concept of what I'm talking about. And it's voila. And I try to make it look like a magician, like voila. But here's what it is. The first thing you have to do as a leader in an organization is you have to genuinely wonder, how are things going? Genuinely wonder. Sit and think when you have nothing else on your mind. Are you wondering about how your people are doing? Or do you care enough to wonder how it's going? The W is wonder. The A is easy. It's ask. do the survey, ask in your one-on-ones, ask specific questions. How do you think we're doing on these areas? But I like to have the objective, anonymous engagement survey to help me do that. So the A is ask them how they're doing. How are we doing as an organization? You might know where I'm going next. The L is listen when they tell you how they're doing and how we're doing as an organization. And then the A is the most important one, which is act on it. Do something. The only thing worse than not doing an engagement survey is doing one and ignoring it. That sends a much clearer message to the organization of how you feel about their input and their perspective and their engagement, honestly, the importance of their engagement, than not doing a survey at all. And so wonder, ask, listen, and act. And it's not like you need to solve every problem every time. Here's how I use those. So we do the measure in the world of HR that I like to use, and this is there's debate about which measure is best. Employee Net Promoter Score is the most universally available tool I have seen, and it's simply 2 questions. And we include these every quarter. We ask these 2 questions, and then once a year we embed these 2 questions in the bank of the other 48 questions that I ask to really get a feel for how we're doing. But every quarter, every person gets a survey link, anonymous survey link that says, how likely are you to recommend our company as a place to work to people in your personal network? Rather than say, how satisfied are you at work, which is a very subjective answer, it asks them what behavior they would exhibit, what action would you take if you were presented with a scenario? How likely are you to recommend us? They answer back, and based on how they answer, they get a follow-up question. The folks that are strong promoters towards the high end of the scale, they get the second question, what gives you the confidence to recommend us as a company? Everyone else gets the question, what is one thing we could do to build your confidence in recommending us as a company? We analyze every word of those verbatim answers. And what I try to do is I will then, the next time the company's all back together, I will walk the whole company through exactly what you told us. The numbers, how they break out, how they compare to last time. And then I will always end with, here are the 4 things that we are going to intentionally pay attention to based on what you told us. And here are the at least 2 decisions that we have made as a company to address what we heard from you in this survey. The next quarter rolls around. You do another engagement survey. In that debrief, I talk about what you told us last quarter. I talk about what we did based on what you told us last quarter compared to what we said we were going to do. And then I tell them what they told us this quarter, and I recap what they told us, and I say the 2 things we're going to do by next quarter. That flywheel of asking, listening, acting, asking, listening, acting is the single most productive way I have seen to build trust and to build engagement in an organization, because they realize they're actually asking me, they're actually listening to what I say, and they're not fixing everything I tell them, but they're fixing something. They're addressing something. Every time I hear from them, every quarter, something has been addressed. And I've seen that play out in 2 organizations where I've intentionally executed this strategy. And in both organizations, we have more than doubled, and in some cases quadrupled, the ENPS score in less than a year. In one organization, we had 12 consecutive quarters of increase in employee net promoter score. And the other organization is just 4 quarters in, and we've had one correction to what I felt was we had a halo effect of some things that happened. Then I just knew it wasn't sustainable, and it wasn't. But we dropped down into the remarkable range as opposed to the unbelievable range on the score. So that's a really long way, I think, to answer what you were asking. But it is a tried and true. Like I have great confidence that if an organization can embrace that heart condition of caring enough to ask and then being smart enough to act, that's the flywheel. that can get an organization moving quickly through some engagement struggles.
What I just heard was a story of accountability.
Yeah.
You're holding management leaders, whatever you want to call it, accountable to the actions and holding them accountable to the team.
Yeah. I would say great observation. Here's what I would say. As I was thinking about coming on this discussion, I felt like I had to better define for myself what I think trust is. And what I came up with was trust for me is about authenticity, and that shows up in two ways: consistency and vulnerability. And then after authenticity, you want to look at care. Is there genuine care? Without it, it's very obvious that it's not there. And then I guess reliability is the other one, which kind of goes along with the authenticity part. But you're exactly right. You are making deposits in the consistency bucket by doing it every quarter. You're putting deposits in the vulnerability bucket by telling them what they've told you and not backing down, not shying away from tough feedback. One thing I didn't mention is what we also do every quarter when we have readouts of the results. We use a tool called Pigeonhole, which is a way to crowdsource anonymous questions, and then we answer questions on the fly in the room. And the way the app works is audience members can either ask questions or they can vote up other people's questions. And so we start at the top of the list that has the highest votes, and we hit them until we're done. And if we don't have time to get through all of them, we commit to provide written answers to the ones that we didn't answer in the meeting. That to me is vulnerability, standing up in front and being willing to take hard, real questions from people. Now, I will tell you, it takes time for people that maybe don't have trust to do the survey, which is why I beg my team, the only number I care about that I want you to do is participation. I want your voice to be heard. That's the only number I want to be 100%. Everything else, you tell us how you feel. But I want the participation number to be 100% because that means everyone has a chance. Everyone has taken the chance that we've given to provide feedback. And so I think it takes time to get that participation up because people are skeptical. They've seen surveys before. They've seen them go asked and not answered. So I just think that's really important to demonstrate that. And then the vulnerability piece is also around, it takes folks a while to feel like they can be vulnerable in their answers. And I think it probably took me 2 quarters to actually convince people that I really don't know who's providing these answers. Like, it is anonymous. In fact, when I debrief, if somebody made a comment that was really concerning to me, I will acknowledge that comment and say, look, I have no way to know who this is, but I want to fix this for you. And I'm asking you to take to take a chance and reach out to me one-on-one. And I think over time, people realize, oh, it actually is anonymous. And I can actually engage in a way that can make this better for myself and for other people if I engage.
Do you find once they understand and trust the system that you've proposed to them, do you find that their input or their questions or concerns become a lot tougher as they become more comfortable with this?
Yeah, it's funny you ask that because I had a dynamic play out recently. So I would say it was what happened to me in this most recent organization. We had really hard questions really early. Because again, we had lots of people that had been there a long time, that had stuck it out, that had I'm all in, I'm not going to leave, but darn it, there's some things we need to work on because I've been here 25 years and there's some stuff we need to work on. So we had tough questions out of the gate. But what's funny is this last quarter, we didn't have many hard questions. And I don't think that's because people aren't engaging. I think it's because we've addressed them. I think it's because they've either felt like they were heard in the survey or that our open, vulnerable Q&A answered the questions, and not that they're out of questions, but we still get an occasional tough question, but they're more about the business, honestly, than about the organizational health, and they used to be about the organizational health.
To take a step back,
Yep.
we're going to talk about care, and I'm going to throw in recognition and put them in the same bucket.
Sure.
Right? Because we've talked about care quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Recognition, and people that watch on this episode, they always hear me reference the difference between me and my wife. Right? For me, I like a little more recognition, a little bit more than a fist bump. It fits me. Her recognition, she pull her to the side one-on-one. You put her in the spotlight and she runs. When you consider care and you consider recognition, what is that? How do you best address recognition in order to recognize in the way that people are comfortable being recognized? What does that look like?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Alan, I want to let you know what a great job you're doing with this podcast and the intentionality that you bring to every guest. I want to publicly acknowledge the incredible job that Alan is doing with the Trust Build podcast.
I'm sitting up straighter now.
You knew I had to do that. No, great question. I think I will say, this is one of those that I probably don't have as passionate and clear of a immediate answer for you, because I think I've learned that human nature is really unique. And the easy answer is everyone has their own love language or has their own way they like to be recognized, and you should tailor your recognition to them. That's fine. But I will tell you that as a whole, we're terrible at true, meaningful recognition of jobs well done. And I don't think it's malicious. I think it's a pace of the place, and it's really hard to stop and do it. And so I think, I really think it starts with knowing your people. And when you onboard a new direct report or you onboard a new employee, I hope that conversations are happening around, hey, listen, how do you like to hear you're doing a good job? And how do you like to hear when I have ideas for ways that you could reach your goals faster? That doesn't mean that if all they want is private feedback, that you still don't celebrate them publicly, because there might be times when the organization needs to see and hear you recognizing people. But I really think there is magic in a manager truly understanding the wiring of a person that they are developing, and then meeting that uniquely. I think there's real power in that. And to know that, you have to ask and you have to listen and you have to really care about knowing your people. I also think organizations have an opportunity to do a better job of recognizing behaviors that you want repeated, culture affirming behaviors. At a previous company, we launched a values award structure where each year we would award one award for each value that was demonstrated throughout the previous year. And it's crowdsourced nominations. Leadership team makes the ultimate call, but it's all employee nomination driven. And just a fun little side fact, we like to let the previous owner, a winner of that value, present the new winner. So there's that cultural connection, that generational connection, right, of the values. In my current organization, we don't necessarily do value-specific awards, but we have a leverage award, which it kind of ties back to our company name, Fulcrum. But it's basically, it's a fun, casual, on the spot, little thing that can sit on a desk, that basically recognizes their embodiment of our culture, of our values. We give maybe 1 to 2 away each time we get together as a total company. And not that acrylic flames that sit on bookshelves are what makes it different, but I think it's the intentionality around having a process and having a structured thing for people to do. It's interesting, Alan. I have always wanted to fully embrace the technologies that are out there where you can tech enable recognition. You can give virtual high fives. People can accumulate points and get things. And I wanted those to work my whole the whole 10 or 15 years I've been on the people side of the equation, and I've yet to find one that results in the authentic interaction that you're looking for. So I've not stuck with any of them, and just gone back to the old tried and true, manager to manager, or manager to direct report, understand what makes them tick and find ways to recognize that. And then publicly, what's your company's strategy around public recognition, and stick with it. That again comes back to authenticity, consistency. You're building trust as you repeat things that you've committed to. That's the trust flywheel.
One of the things that you mentioned in there, I heard the word feedback. Mm-hmm. There's an organization I've worked with, and one of the things that impressed me about them is when they onboarded, they told the people they were onboarding as employees, here's the 3 different types of feedback you're going to experience working here. And they told them on the front end before they came in.
So they're not surprised.
Here's how you're going to get feedback.
Yeah.
It's going to be positive. It's going to be constructive. There's going to be, there's going to be different ways that you're going to hear feedback. And they're like, oh, okay. So that when they received it, they didn't get defensive.
Yeah.
In your experience with feedback and giving feedback, where do you see that fit within an organization?
Yeah. Obviously it's important. And but the authenticity of it is really, really important. For example, the worst thing you can do is deliver tough feedback for the first time in an annual documented performance review. That never goes well. And if we have time, I'll tell you a story, a very vulnerable story. But it's got to be, I can't remember who said it first, and this is probably a combination of Brene Brown and Adam Grant and others, but is it kind? Is it necessary? And is it true? And if it meets those criteria, then the last one is it timely? Like, does it need to be done right now? And so I think if you can embrace some kind of framework or some kind of purposeful, like your organization did, of here's how it's going to go here. I will give you a less formal but equally intentional story. The worst job I've ever done developing a direct report was in 2015. I started new at a company and had a direct report who had been there about a year before I got there. And just in full transparency, they were having a rough year. They had lost a mother. Their performance was rightly so. Like, they were a little bit not all checked in all the time, which I understood. They were supporting multiple people, but they were reporting to me. And so it was one of those where I had to go source feedback to give meaningful feedback. Well, the compassionate leader that I thought I was being was holding the feedback until I could have a sit-down conversation. And I delivered that feedback, prepared, studied, rehearsed, wanted to do it in a kind way. And it was terrible. Like, I failed at that interaction with that very important coworker, direct report. And she let me know it, and she should have. What I learned that day was that, I learned that I wanted to do buy-in based feedback. I used to call it permission based feedback, but you really don't get to give me permission to give you feedback. So that didn't necessarily work. But buy-in based feedback says, okay, what are you trying to accomplish in your career? What do you want your development to look like? And where do you want to go? Do I have your buy-in that when I see things that are either accelerating that path for you or slowing down that path for you, do I have your buy-in that I have your best interest at heart? You and I are in this together. And if I care enough about you, which I do, I have to give you feedback. And it will be in the moment, and it will be kind, true, and necessary. And then they say yes, because they want to grow in their career. Well, that permission, that yes, we've now bought in that we're going to do this. It's not surprising. I started out by saying, remember, we talked about us being in this together. hey, in that meeting back there, I want to give you some feedback about how you responded to a question or how you presented the information that you've been working on. That lands differently than when you go into it having a reason for the feedback. From that conversation on, I approached feedback as buy-in based feedback. Regardless of the year you're having, the time you're having, if you and I are on mission together and the mission is your development, do I have your permission to share tough feedback or any kind of feedback in the moment? And the answer was yes. And we were great. Had lunch a month and a half ago, had lots of laughs. But man, I almost didn't survive that one as a manager. Like I thought, man, I'm not cut out for this. Like I think I'm being compassionate and I'm not. Like I'm actually the opposite because I'm holding back feedback they need to get better. And it wasn't until I had the unlock of actually, let's get their buy-in that I'm going to give them feedback. And it worked.
I guess I'm hesitating for a minute because when you're having a conversation like that, do you consider the behavioral style of the person that you're communicating with to speak a language that they can understand?
Well, you try. I certainly try to adapt my style to meet their style if that's the way the message will land. I mean, any good manager, I hope, would care enough to understand what their style needs and try to meet. And it's the whole situational leadership model, Ken Blanchard, all of that. But at the end of the day, I'm also responsible for the development of a team. And so if hopefully I can find that common ground where I can adapt enough to where it lands well, it lands authentically. Where I thought you were going with that was when you're talking about style, the difficulty of giving style feedback. I'm of the school that says, look, style isn't something necessarily that you want to coach or correct. It's natural. It's their natural. The way I have found to have those conversations is to differentiate between the what and the how. So I want to give you feedback on what you delivered. You missed this expectation, or this project didn't get delivered in the way it was supposed to be delivered, or on the time it was supposed to be delivered. What was expected of you was not met. Okay, that's the what. Or if I'm dealing with someone who shows up in a meeting and is unproductive or combative, or their style just doesn't work for that meeting, I will say, hey, listen, what you're doing, the work you're delivering, thank you. You're doing great work. How you're delivering it is impacting other people. And I don't think you know that. So I want to help you understand that. And I'm hopeful that you'll hear this and want to care enough to think about adapting your style when necessary. When I do that, that lands way differently than, hey, you were really critical in that meeting. Don't do that. It's look, how you're showing up. I don't think you understand the impact it's having on folks. I'm not talking about the what you're delivering, because most people, if you don't give them that context, they think, well, I'm failing at my job. I'm not meeting expectations. And it's important to say, no, there's a difference. But by the way, both are really important. And when you provide coaching and one of them, there's not the progress that needs to be made to align with the values and the culture, a decision might have to be made. But there is a difference between what and how.
There's an art to that.
Oh yeah. No, I'm saying this like I know how to do it, and that I do it well. I think I can look at that camera and say, Joy, Carrie, I don't get it right most of the time. But my heart is to get it. My heart is to understand it and try.
Yeah.
That's all we can do.
It's an art. It really is. I mean, there's assessments out there that cognitive behavioral, there's all kinds of stuff out there, but it's how to apply them, how to take that information and artfully implement it so that
caringly, artfully, both.
Right. Yeah. That you can impact the organization and the people. So if you impact the people, you're impacting the organization in a positive way. Wow, we went down a great rabbit hole there.
That was fun.
That was fun. I did want to pick on assessments for a minute.
Sure.
When a new hire comes in, or let's say a candidate is coming into an organization and they have no experience or education around what assessments do and how they're used and all that, how do you introduce the idea and the concept of what an assessment is and how it is used within an organization?
And I just want to clarify that you're talking about assessment tools that are available, not assessing performance.
Correct.
Not your performance management
like
system.
DISC and predictive index
Great.
and all that kind of stuff.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I'm a junkie. I've taken, I think, every single one I can get my hands on. And I've learned a lot about myself. I've gotten really good clarity on some things. So I'm a big fan when used responsibly, put it that way. So your question is, somebody who's never involved in that, never done that, how do we position that to them? Here's what I will say, and this is real time. One of the pieces of feedback that we got from the team in the survey, and in fact, this was 2 years worth of feedback. It just didn't rise to the top last year of something we wanted to address or could address. It came up again, which is, look, there's leadership style. There's I want to understand how to work better with my team. I want to understand the dynamics. And so we committed as a company that we were going to roll out a tool. And I think it's important for organizations to pick something, because the power of a shared vocabulary is so strong that it short cycles lots of things. It short cycles feedback. If you can put it in the language of the tool that you've embraced, they know what you mean. There's universal understanding of what that means. And there are other people that have that same challenge, and you know that because you've done the assessment together. But I think I encourage organizations to pick one, go all in, build that shared vocabulary, and then it's really important to have internal resources that are certified and facilitating that particular tool. I also like going outside and getting experts, but that helps us get it started. But for it to really take root and to become part of the culture, I want to have a coworker that I can connect a new hire to and say, hey, listen, Joy is our expert on the Enneagram, and she can walk through your results and help you understand kind of what that might look like in our company and who that might, what that might look like. So the answer is yes, believe in them, pick one at least at a time. Don't overload people. And then build up the internal muscles to be able to do your own facilitation in time when the organization knows enough about the tool and knows the vocabulary. To your question, was a new hire that's never done this. I've never thought about that. I probably should give more thought to how it lands when we say, fill this out and we're going to tell you what you're like. And, which obviously we don't do it that way. But when you serve it up as, hey, we've embraced this as a company. Here's why we've chosen this one. And here's the report you're going to get. And by the way, we have the ability to sit down with you and your manager and kind of facilitate here's how your working relationship might work based on what we know about how you completed this particular exercise. I've not encountered anybody that would push back on that and say, no, thanks. I don't want to do that.
Yeah, you're just providing clarity around the tools that you use. If
there's a sufficient amount of perceived trust that it won't be wielded against me, right? I will tell you, I have experience with an organization that I tried to help, that I did help. One of the battle scars was a leader used a tool politically, used it to manipulate, used it to, and the organization was soured on the idea of assessments, let alone that one assessment. So that's tricky. I mean, I know it circles back to the name of the podcast, but if your organization trusts that you have their best interests at heart and they trust that you genuinely want to get better and grow, tools are a great thing.
I could go on. This is engaging. So I think we're going to have to wrap it up.
Sure thing.
And I'm going to invite you back. I'm not done with this.
Let's do it.
But I've got a couple of questions.
Sure.
Fun questions.
Yeah, love them.
For somebody out there that's really engaged with this conversation, and you could recommend a book that would help them with all this, what would you recommend? A book or books?
Yeah. I knew you were going to ask this because I've watched your other shows and I came prepared with props.
Okay. Props. Oh boy. Here we go.
I have 3 books because they serve 3 different purposes. Okay. What the question I've heard you ask most frequently is, what book do you find yourself recommending the most or giving away the most?
Yeah.
This book is the one I've given away the most. It's written by a friend named Paul Smith, and it's basically there's 10 core stories that every leader should have at the ready. The origin story of the organization, a story about when they failed in one of their values and what it cost and how it looks. So this is just a really, really short read, good reference for leaders. This is the one I give to new leaders when they either get tapped into a leadership role or a founder has just started a company. This is the one I give away the most. Mm-hmm. This is the one I recommend the most, and it's not about culture. But I tend to find myself getting to meet with people over breakfast, and a lot of them are in this biz dev, SDR sales space. And I have just found that Mike's book, New Sales Simplified, is the most universally beneficial book for people that are trying to understand how to manage relationships, manage the funnel. This book is the one that changed my life. And so I recommend it also, but not nearly as much as this one probably. Matthew Kelly, Rhythm of Life. I read this book when I made the decision. Well, I read this book, which resulted in me making the decision to pivot hard into my calling from sales into the people and culture side of an organization, which I just did that 13 years ago. I had 23 years of selling diapers and chocolate to Walmart and Costco and Sam's Club before that, and that was fun, and that was what I was hired to do, and that was what I was good at. But this book helped me clarify what I was supposed to be doing, and it gave me the courage to actually go do it. So those are my 3 books.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Well, thank you, Steve. Thank you being on the show. It's been very engaging for me.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Alan. Thanks for having me.
You bet.